The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to Device Authority's webinar, Unlocking the Value of IoT with Lifecycle Management, with special guests from Komodo CA and Intel. My name is Rosa Lenders, and I am pleased to introduce our speakers for today, Adam Eriksson, Damon Katcher, and Jan Kruger. Adam has over 20 years' experience of working for enterprise software companies, building out markets in employee provisioning, encryption, secure credentialing, and IoT solutions. He is currently Vice President of Business Development for Device Authority and is responsible for our strategic channel relationships. Damon is the Vice President of IoT Solutions at Komodo CA. Prior to joining Comodo, he began his career with 15 years at VeriSign Symantec, where he was responsible for 2 billion device PKI certificates and over 300 million threat intelligence subscribers. Damon is a member of multiple security working groups for industry organizations, has spoken at a variety of conferences, and has participated on several panels regarding device PKI ecosystem and cybersecurity. Jan is a product manager for Intel's platform security division. He is currently working on various security projects and technologies, fulfilling the requirements of the market by leveraging Intel's hardware and software assets. He represents Intel at the IoT Security Foundation to support best practices for cybersecurity. He is focused on security for critical infrastructure systems in the European industrial and energy market, also known as Industrial IoT or Industry 4.0. We expect the webinar to last approximately an hour, and we hope you can stay until the end to hear about a couple offers available to help accelerate your upcoming projects. You will be able to submit questions via the question window in the GoToWebinar control panel throughout the session. We will try and answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. A recording of the webinar will be made available tomorrow on the Device Authority website, and everyone who has registered will be emailed the link. I shall now hand over to our speakers. Adam?
Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate everyone joining us today, or who will join us as they download the webinar at a later date. I'd like to thank Jan and Damon for joining us. The topic that we're getting into today, the IoT device lifecycle management, is a relatively new topic that has been coming to market in the past few years and has really gained acceleration of late due to a variety of factors, not the least of which is IoT projects are going from a POC stage into actual commercial stage, as well as government regulation that is going to govern a lot of the security privacy angles for it. Hopefully today, with our panel, we'll be able to provide some insight and provide some food for thought on what is the lifecycle journey of IoT devices. How do you secure IoT devices? How do you ensure that the data from those IoT devices is secure? As we've done in previous webinars, and as Damon will speak to today, we're a firm believer that public key infrastructure, or PKI, can solve many of the security issues with regards to IoT, but ultimately the automation of that function is mandatory to make it work at scale. And then also understand the compliance guidelines that are currently being discussed in the European Union as well as the United States over the IoT device lifecycle. So getting into this, first we'll have the introductions for each company, and then we'll get into the IoT device lifecycle journey, and hopefully by the end of the webinar, we'll have provided, as I said, some food for thought, as well as some engagement materials for everyone to enjoy. So Device Authority, we are an enterprise software company. We have our Keyscaler software platform for IoT Identity Access Management, or IAM. We have developed throughout the years a very robust software platform that has, at the heart of it, been trying to address how do you automate device provisioning at scale, and how do you automate the credential management of devices at scale to ease the journey into IoT projects. Through our journey in our software, we have realized that IoT security is not a single product, but it requires an ecosystem, which is why we have Intel and Comodo on the phone today, because they are critical parts of this ecosystem. As we've come to market, we've been recognized by various analyst houses that we are on the lead edge of this burgeoning market and that our software solves many of these issues. We believe we have some interesting insights as our road to market has led us from partnering with silicon manufacturers like Intel, going through to the ODMs, OEMs for the gateways and other devices, passing along into the enterprise platforms that are specifically designed for IoT. From there, working with various system integrators that are designing IoT solutions, and finally working with the certificate authorities such as Comodo. And each one of these sectors is required in the IoT ecosystem to truly provide a good comprehensive view of the security. And so that's something that we like to offer out as our expertise as we've been bringing this to market. So with that being said, I'll hand it off to Jan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome as well from my end. This is Jan Krüger speaking. As I mentioned before, I'm happy to join here today from the Intel side of the house. And as you know, Intel is currently undergoing, let's say, an evolution in really moving towards a data company. As our CEO said, data is the new oil. And within that process, a lot of topics we haven't traditionally been not looking into, like device lifecycle, like device identity, especially in IoT, has become a very important topic for us. And that it's resulting into our vision, which we would like to partly share. I would like to share partly today, is really that everything which is smart and connected runs really good on Intel. But we need the rest of the ecosystem with the other two gentlemen here today to really give you the right tool set into your hands to deliver secure, reliable, and good products for the market. And that's what we as a silicon provider and service provider to a certain extent provide with our systems and solutions. With that, I would hand it over to the next speaker, and then we come back later on to the Intel part in this webinar today.
Great, thank you, Jan. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining. This is Damon Kocher from Komodo CA. Komodo has over 20 years of experience providing digital identity and authentication solutions to the internet, devices, and networks globally. We are currently expanding on this experience to make PKI easier to understand and to consume, especially around the IoT. We have offices around the world that allow for us to provide in-region coverage and support and local language support to make sure that those things are handled appropriately. Being in security, transparency is key, and we participate in multiple third-party audits throughout the year to make sure that our processes and procedures are up to date, current, and beyond what is needed in the market. We're industry leaders, and we were a founding member of the CAB Forum and also participate with GSMA, the WiMAX Forum, Open Connectivity Foundation, Zigbee, and finally joint venture Silicon Valley. In October of 2017, Francisco Partners acquired Komodo CA from Comodo Group to provide increased investment in global partnerships and security.
Thank you, Damon. Okay. So obviously there's 101 different definitions of what is or is not IoT, what are IoT products, etc. And from the device authority viewpoint, we'll get more in detail later on this. We really take a look at it from a basic function, and that is, if you can't trust the identity of the device, how can you possibly trust the data coming off of that device? And we state that because IoT devices come from a background of M2M, I mean machine to machine, communication. And in the enterprise world, we're very used to, if an employee comes on board, I can give them multi-factor authentication to their laptop or to a corporate application, etc. But with an IoT device, as it goes out to the field, the question is, how do you create a unique identity for each particular device so that you understand that that is the device that you purchased, that's the device that you provisioned, and that's the device that is authorized to communicate back to the application that's consuming that information. Second, as we see in the life cycle, and we'll get more into this, now you're dealing with, okay, I'm generating information that needs to be consumed by the enterprise side of the house. And the enterprise side of the house, once again, has its traditional identity and access management platforms that are user-based, meaning I'm assigning something to a particular user. And a lot of corporations today are trying to figure out, can they use that schematic to control their IoT devices? And the fact of the matter is, today, that will not work, simply because programmatically, those platforms were not designed to be able to provision out devices that don't have a pretty graphical user interface or the ability to update once they're out in the field. So as we get into this device lifecycle management, it's critical that as a company or an organization is planning on an IoT strategy, whether it's a manufacturer that wants to do an IoT platform for its users to access, or whether it's an organization that wants to have a unified IoT credential management platform, the life cycle is critical to understand, from where the device gets manufactured to how it comes online, how it gets used, and what is going to be that life of the device. For device authority, we've been involved in certain situations where the life of the device is estimated at less than a year. In other situations, it's estimated more than 10 years. So throughout that journey, we're going to be talking about not only provisioning, but what is the ongoing credential management. Because as my good friend Damon on the phone constantly reminds everyone out in the industry, it's up to all of us in the ecosystem to continually raise the bar in the security fashion, because whatever is online will eventually attempt to be hacked. So we have to keep this as a moving target as we're managing the entire IoT life cycle. So at Device Authority and with our partners, we kind of map out what is the device journey. And again, as our ecosystem has demonstrated, we've had the pleasure and sometimes the pain of trying to understand from birth to death of a device, what are all the stages that it goes to get into the market. And earlier this year, we've done numerous webinars, some with our partners doing hardware security modules, some doing penetration testing on devices to see if they could be hacked. And all of it is to try to expose some of these areas where, how do we increase that level of security from the insertion of the hardware root of trust that Jan will talk to at the manufacturing stage. And once that silicon goes from off the Intel lines and into an ODM that's embedding it into a particular product, how does that work? How does the ownership transfer work for that? Eventually, again, goes out into the market, and now we have registration and onboarding. And I think this is a critical thing to understand because, once again, if I'm deploying 10,000 devices, how do I do that with the least amount of human intervention as possible? And so this is where Device Authority and Intel and Comodo, we all work together to make this an automated process for ease of use and increase of time to value. And ultimately, most of these devices are talking to an IoT platform, whether it's talking to AWS IoT or it's talking to PTC ThingWorks or a variety of other platforms out there. Seems like new ones are cropping up every day. The question, once again, is how do I securely register this device to pass along data and information to this particular platform? And how do I continually make sure that that device has not been compromised? And eventually, as it goes along, and Damon will talk to this, I always want to make sure that I can rotate my credentials on an automated policy basis so that I don't have an administrator that is trying to change a password or change a PKI certificate for 10,000 devices one at a time. And so ultimately then the device is out in the field, it's being used, and at the end of the life cycle, what happens? if the device then gets sold in the aftermarket, how do you revoke the credentials that were provisioned out to that device? And how do you ensure security along the way? So these are some of the things that we're going to want to address today in this. And throughout this journey at Device Authority, we've identified basically 4 stages of IoT device lifecycle management. And we have this at the end of the presentation. We actually have a link to our technical insight guide that goes through these more in depth. But basically, it's step 1, we have a root key injection for production, and that's where the Intel EPID that Jan will talk to, and Damon will explain from the embedded program at Comodo, to the secure device onboarding. Once again, Jan from Intel will go through SDO, and then we'll add in why Device Authority is partnered with Intel on that initiative. On the security management stage, once it gets into more of the data center areas, how does the Komodo CA work with that in conjunction with our Keyscaler platform? And finally, as that is being transitioned and used in the entire enterprise, how does that work within a corporate decision-making process on how they're going to do their credential management and lifecycle management of the device? So in a nutshell, the benefits that we stress is, number 1, if you can do zero-touch provisioning and remove the human element, then your time to value of your IoT project increases dramatically. Second, if the end user can control their own security means and ways, then that allows for a streamlined way to not only adhere to compliance, but to set the policy across it. And then ultimately on the automation, once again at IoT scale, it is going to be impossible to do it with human intervention trying to manage the entire process. So throughout this conversation today, we're going to continue to try to highlight some of those areas, because once again, as IoT projects go from, okay, I have this theory on a whiteboard, to I'm doing this internal POC, to, oh, now I've got 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 devices out in the field. How do I do this? And so we're going to try to provide some insight with the panel today to do that. So with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Kruger. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So if you can unfold the whole slide, I think you did that already. What I wanted to talk about to set the scene is a problem statement in the first place. So as we talk about identity and provisioning of credentials to those assets and the huge amount of those assets, it's always a matter of how we deliver those credentials to a device. And as Intel, we've been looking a couple of years back when the IoT story basically started. And working with our partners, we figured very quickly that one of the barriers of adoption is that very first moment of a life of a device. If you imagine you have 50,000, 100,000 million different devices, and you want to bring them into a given service, whether it's cloud-based or it's local-based or some hybrid version of it, or you want to establish network connections on all sorts of radio interfaces, then for all of these setups, the device needs some sort of secret, usually a certificate or ideally a certificate, and not just some username or password or nothing, which would be the worst scenario. And in order to get a secret to the device, there are a couple of barriers to overcome. And the first one is the sheer volume. That if you have the huge amount of devices, then how you going to get those signatures and secrets into the device in an automated, scalable manner? And rather than having some people opening every single box and configuring the device with certain secrets and then packing it up again and then send it to the site where it belongs to or to their customer who needs that, that's not a very scalable process when it comes to large-scale deployment. The other problem with provisioning these type of devices is also the protection of the secret. We need to make sure that whatever we leave at the device, and when the device is, for example, manufactured somewhere in Asia Pac or somewhere in the US or somewhere in Europe, and the device ships around the world, that whatever we leave at the device is being stored in a secure manner, as well as what is stored is not exposing identity information or exposing information on the specifics of the service the device is going to. And so if you look into some deployments today, what's happening is that the customers are sending secrets to some vendors in Asia Pac where the device is manufactured, and then this device manufacturer is injecting that secret into the device right away. There are a lot of issues with doing that, because sharing your private secrets, your private keys and all this stuff with somebody in another company is always a risk. And how you control that your secret is not being lost. And if it lost, well, how you remediate all this stuff. So there are a lot of concerns and a lot of issues around such a process. The other thing which is very much important is automation, that when you have these provisioning or you need that provisioning capabilities to a device, that you can scale them out to a huge number of devices. Recently, in Europe in particular, it was all the scandal about Facebook and others, privacy and protection of personal identifiable information has become very public in media, even though it was very public the years before. In my work, I was working with European Union, or I was here in Germany, and where I'm based, working with the German government or working with other authorities in the different countries. The topic of identity and identity protection and identifying every single asset in the first place has already been a topic for years. And the challenge with it is always the anonymity, that you need to make sure that if you have an identity on the device, that it doesn't leak or leave any traceable information. It is available, it's an identity you can validate and you can attest again to, but it must not expose any sort of information relating to the actual owner or target of the device. So that said, what we are providing with our service in this case, it's called Inter-Secure Device Onboard. Unfortunately, the form messed up here, but nevertheless, the objective here is that we have built an identity theme, which is called Enhanced Privacy ID. And that is an international standard by now under ISO and TCG and others. And Enhanced Privacy ID is basically an cryptographic theme based on elliptic curves, which gives you anonymity out of the box. It has been designed for anonymous identity verification. And we use this identity as a source for our service, where the service which is doing the zero-touch onboarding enables the provisioning of your secrets, which you need to bring the device into a certain service or application it's going to need. And we build that service and provide this to the market as a service offering by Intel to automate the provisioning of your secrets to this methodology. So we have built an ecosystem for that, or we are in process of building an ecosystem. That's why we're here today with partners here on the phone as well, which are integrating within that framework. And also to make it very clear, this is not a technology exclusively to Intel systems. This is a technology which applies beyond that. You find already in the market systems from other vendors like a Microchip, which is doing sensing systems, or from partners like Infineon, which are doing DPMs, or from other vendors. And we can share with you, if you are interested, a longer list of those. But it's a technology, it's a framework and a service which is, we believe, solving a huge problem in the entire industry. That's why we need to make it very much open. And also most of it is coming at no cost to the industry, so that we are not adding another barrier up here. So how does this actually works, and what's the value for you by selecting a service like the one from Device Authority, which is integrating with SDO, with Secure Device Onboard. So you have here on the left side the red box, and this is basically the device, and that's what's inside of the device. There is some secure identity, and this is this so-called enhanced privacy ID identity. And there's a little piece of firmware which has been pre-provisioned to the device by the manufacturer. And there are certain APIs which then are exposed to the user space, to the operating system, which then sits on that device, which allows the agent, whatever agent you have, to get the secrets we have been delivering to the device after the fact. What's important here is that this whole environment runs in a very secure space. And it's also important that if you are an end customer, you don't need to worry how this is done, because you can go in the market and buy devices like a Dell device, an HP device, an Advantech device, microchip, you name it, a very long list of devices which are pre-enabled with these capabilities. On the other side, you have device authority, which is on the other side, which implements our device management portion of the system, which allows device authority to integrate the capabilities we provide into their service and deliver their initial provisioning or use the initial provisioning from SDO, so that the device automatically, without any human interaction, is onboarded into the device authority system for further processing. So in the first step, they are going to tell us that they are the owner. There's some very complex ownership process around it. Think about it like blockchain, just as in the nutshell. Then in the second step, you take one of those devices from Dell, to pick one, and you just have the operating system on that device. And you don't need to provision any sort of secret to this device yet. The only thing you need to do is basically switch it on, and it will start the initial onboarding process by performing in device identification against our service, which sits in the cloud. And if the identity is proven based on the enhanced privacy ID, we are basically telling the device who is your owner, where do you need to go, and therefore we deliver some data. And then the device is going to the device authority registration service, for example, and now the device registration service is delivering the secrets the device needs just in time to the device. So certificates, keys, software, whatever you need basically. And when the device is now storing this information in a secure manner, then the device is then initializing the last step, which is basically telling the actual agent, which is the device authority agent or an Amazon agent or whatever agent, that here are the material you need to make your initial connection to your final service. And that's then what happened in the last step. And this process I've just explained here in a nutshell, that's what, if you do this manually, take a long time, take a lot of effort, and take a lot of people doing it. And there's a lot of security holes you might open up that way. With Secure Device Onboard integrated in services of device authority allows you to seamlessly, automatically provision secrets when they are needed. So now you can order a device from somewhere. The device comes without any secrets on it, except that initial Secure Device Onboard capabilities, which are not exposing anything. And when the device is then switched on, it will get what it needs to make its way into the system. So that's in a nutshell what we are providing in the context of a device onboarding and zero-touch provisioning to overcome the problem of delivering the necessary information and helping the industry to actually get their great solutions into the market and place the devices in a fast manner into the market and automate the whole thing.
Jan, I'd like to ask you a question because I know number one, we've been collaborating with Intel for at least 2 years on the SDO project, and we know recently you were at Embedded World. What is Intel seeing as far as people out in the industry understanding the concept of SDO, and what are you kind of forecasting for rapid adoption rates? When is the market going to firmly grasp the value proposition and need to go forward? Because device authority, we firmly understand the problem set. So we'll be interested to get your opinion on your most recent discussions out in the market.
A good question. Thank you. Actually, since we are working with security device or have launched security device onboard for quite some time in the market. We have already a couple of launch partners, like in Amazon, like in Google as well, which are utilizing the zero-touch provisioning capabilities within their own services. On the other hand, we have already built this ecosystem of device vendors like Dell, HP, Advantech, and many others, which are implementing the client or the device side of it to offer these kind of capabilities into the market. And the question why they do it, well, there are already legislations, or not legislations yet, but best known methodologies and recommendations by various European or international consortia and government bodies. Like, for example, look at in Europe at the ENISA, which is the European security arm, or the organization which takes care of the security pieces for the European Union. If you look into their IoT recommendation, identity, anonymity, and zero-touch provisioning are the three of their criteria for a secure IoT service and product. And there are many other more vertical or industry-focused recommendations for healthcare, for example, for retail or for industry, like Industry 4.0 use cases, where zero-touch provisioning and onboarding has become an requirement. And there aren't that many solutions out there today which scale to the level security device onboard scales, as well as to the amount of devices from their type. I mean, from what platform they are running on, what operating system they're running on, what size they have, and so on. So we are already reaching a wide market, and my expectation is for the coming years that the identity piece is going to be very much of important, as well as that automation, because all of us, we build a service and we build products, and we want they go fast into the market because that's what we generate the revenue with. And so as fast as we can, get the products in the market as better, and automation is one key piece there. GDPR is mentioned here as well, which is very important nowadays, and the companies are waking up happily after many years now that this is really an important topic. And STO helps you already on GDPR because the onboarding process is anonymized, and so it already directly complies to the requirements from GDPR of not exposing any personal identifiable information, as well as you protect the secrets in a proper manner, so that even if the secrets are at the device, they are stored in a proper way, which is also partly requested by GDPR. So it's just a snapshot, and there are most probably many other standards and many other recommendations in that field, but that's going to be a topic everybody has to deal with in the coming years for sure.
Yeah. So from the device authority perspective, I'm sure Damon will weigh in on this during his segment. We definitely see, government regulation now putting pressure on CISOs as well as chief risk compliance officers. They're getting asked questions by their board of directors saying, are we exposed, and do we know what's out there? And I think that's the other component to the IoT lifecycle management, is that ultimately the demand from the top executives is going to be, provide me my audit trail, my audit report of when a device was provisioned, what type of device was it, what was my security policy governing that device or those range of devices. And so I think all of that's going to become more sophisticated in the upcoming years. And once again, that goes back to just the basics of business and risk management. So Jan, thank you for that answer. So with that, Damon, you're on the clock.
Excellent. So IoT security is part of the core focus at Comodo. Providing global coverage and support for enterprises, ecosystems, and consumers is very important to being successful. Comodo has put in the systems in place to handle IoT at scale. Thus, we provide support in 7 different languages. We're constantly including additional languages, and our system can issue 5,000 certificates per second. You might ask why this is important. Well, we don't ever want to be a bottleneck. to a device manufacturer, as we understand that the costs associated with running a manufacturing line and the importance of bringing new devices to market quickly. But you've got to have that security piece included within that offering. We have a common theme between Device Authority and Comodo of better together, and that allows us to bring to market the devices to market at the time with the proper security already embedded. And the proper security is allowing us to rotate that key. So for the last 15 years, IoT devices have been issued, PKI certificates at the point of manufacture and sent out into the wild. They've been on their own. There's been no chance of being able to revoke and replace that certificate. And now Device Authority gives you that ability, along with Comodo, to replace that certificate. So if an executive, a board of directors, a industry standard, or a working group says that key needs to be rotated every 6 months, you don't need to send a human being out to do it. Device Authority has that ability to do it. So again, providing top tier support, having the in-region coverage, issuance capability of almost 250 million certificates per day. All those certificates are issued under the authority of the audits that we participate in, and they're issued from the regions that need to be issued from. We also have the partnership with Gemalto. This is very key. HSM technology is very, very important to what we're doing. And if any of you on the phone have ever worked with HSM providers, it can be a very daunting task in getting those provisioned in a timely manner. We have eliminated that fashion. We've taken inventory of HSMs, and we can provision customers in up to 2 weeks now for something that would take 3 to 4 months before. And again, thought leadership is very important here. So our participation with these industry standards, working groups, industry bodies worldwide are very, very important and key for us. So the embedded strategy. We've had the pleasure of having Intel join us today. A very important part of what we're working on right now is working with the embedded world. For years, Comodo has been successful with SSL certificates and working with web hosts and domain registrars to secure websites from the birth of the website. In IoT, we want to work at the birthplace of the device. So embedding with chipset manufacturers, SIM providers, the embedded world, we have to be there to begin the life of the device with the proper security. Too many devices are coming to market with weak or zero security pre-installed. We've been seeing this for many, many years, and every couple months we see a major attack pop up. I believe Mirai was around 100,000 devices. So if you look at my example below, if you imagine having 300,000 devices out in the wild and something like Mirai occur, the impact is going to be much greater than we experienced a year and a half ago. For the past 13 years, again, 15 years, we haven't been able to reach out to that device. And now with Keyscaler, it gives us the ability to communicate with that device throughout the life cycle of the device. So if there is a vulnerability, if you have 300,000 devices out there, you're a hospital group, you're an insurance group, you're some type of service provider, and you've got 300,000 devices out there, an attack occurs, you can take an immediate security posture against those, revoke and replace and put a new certificate on. For example, back, I believe it was 2007, a vulnerability in SHA-1 popped up. All the certificates that were issued under SHA-1 were now vulnerable, and there was no way to go out and revoke and replace those. And I hate to say it, but some of those devices are still out in the wild today and are completely invulnerable. So how do we solve this problem? How do we achieve to be successful? Well, we have secure batch issuance from Comodo, and that is, again, trusted third-party PKI. We have to be able to issue those certificates at scale. Manufacturers are concerned today with their own manufacturing security. The trust at the manufacturing facilities outside of the US is a concern. Fraudulent or duplicate device creation is rampant. One for me, one for the company is a common theme at a lot of the production facilities outside of the US. Or some companies have taken on the security posture of using a shared key or a default password. That doesn't create a solid security stance either. So the answer to solving all this is trusted third-party PKI. We can burn registration certificates in at the factory level that don't involve any personnel. These again are issued off of the trusted root and are only handled by trusted advisors outside of the company. We load the trusted third-party PKI certificate then on when that device first connects to a network. And then using Keyscaler throughout that process, we do have the ability to, again, revoke and replace throughout the life cycle of the device, providing a constant security stance for that device throughout the entire life cycle.
Hey, Damon, I have a question, actually two questions
Sure,
for
Adam.
you on this. Number one, I know as we go out into the market, we run into various corporations and organizations that have been using, PKI internally for web applications, email, et cetera. And, they stand up their own internal, certificate authority in-house, and oftentimes multiple certificate authorities in-house that, don't talk to each other. So first question is, getting a positive understanding of the value of a third-party CA such as a Comodo versus someone, determined or wanting to do this internally. How's that affect scalability? And then second, obviously there's already a lot of devices out in the wild. Is there an ability between, Comodo, Device Authority, et cetera, to be able to retroactively help these devices get new credentials and upgrade on a go-forward path in their life cycle?
Yeah, I think, Adam, you mentioned, the traditional use cases of PKI, and a lot of people, when I go and speak places, people are saying, oh, we use PKI internally. And yes, you have a private root that you've signed, and you have your own ecosystem internally where you're using those certificates to digitally encrypt email, authenticate yourself into a portal, something of that nature. We've taken that same technology, we've put it into a device. And what we do is we allow that device now to mutually authenticate itself to the network head end. And that's all done within an encrypted session. So we're only allowing, in the use case that you provided with the company and the user certs, only those users within that company are allowed to access that portal or to sign emails off of that domain. And you carry that over into the device world. Now that device that has that private PKI certificate can only communicate and authenticate into that network. Devices that don't have that credential or that certificate on it cannot authenticate themselves into the network. So if you look at it as a country club or a playground, you need to have a pass to go into there. And if you don't have that certificate, you're not going to be allowed access in. And that's very key to the health and safety of a device ecosystem, very similar as it is to the health and safety of an internal network for a corporate enterprise.
And as far as the retrofitting out to existing devices in the market, given your experience over the past 15 years out there, how do you see that being transitioned or accomplished?
Well, it's a game changer for one, Adam. Like I've mentioned several times on the call, the ability to do that hasn't been there. And so for now, for enterprises to be able to go out and speak to their own devices, for an ecosystem from a standards body to be able to go out and to change the policy and to evolve with the security threats in the landscape that's being presented is very key. This is something that we haven't had in the industry before, and now we're able to, again, put a proper security stance in place rather than giving the device a certificate and a security stance at the birth of the device and sending it out and hoping that it can survive for 15 or 20 years.
Gotcha. And I know, and this is for the benefit of, once again, educating, hopefully, the followers on this webinar, is number one, we've been having discussions with Damon and his vision for and Comodo with PKI, he calls it 2.0, which has these enhanced services, really because, once again, dealing with the concept of PKI and certificate authorities, there's a lot of confusion in the market as to what a certificate authority can provide versus what they can't provide. And so what we're trying to accomplish in a lot of things with education is saying, understand what the ecosystem provider provides and why, once again, you need additional components to achieve the advanced security, as Damon just referenced, being able to rotate certificates as per security policy, automation, et cetera. So I think that that's a critical thing that we want to highlight to the market, so that organizations, when they're building out their IoT device plans, they don't operate on false information. And I think, Damien, your next slide here will go into part of that.
Excellent. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, we are. So on the securing the ecosystem, and again, this is where I've got personally a lot of experience in working with the private network ecosystems around the world. And as I mentioned before, the devices without proper authentication credentials will not be allowed to communicate into that ecosystem. And you might ask, how can I be sure that the IoT devices connecting to my network are authorized to be there? How can I manage hundreds of thousands of devices, millions of devices, or billions of devices? And yes, we are at that point now where it's 10 billion, 25 billion, 50 billion devices coming on the market within the next couple of years. And how can how can an improved IoT device without proper security kind of knock on my network door and quickly get a certificate, get in, get approved, and get access to the network? Again, we'll highlight the cloud-based portal that we have that can issue trusted third-party certificates for authentication, and then the lifecycle management platform that Device Authority provides from Keyscaler that's integrated into that cloud-based portal. So we have a single management console where an administrator can come in who's used to issuing maybe 1, 5, 10 certificates. Now they've got the control and the ability to manage millions, if not billions of certificates through one single management console. So let me give you guys a quick example here for IoT in the embedded world. And one of the popular use cases that we're seeing today is smart cities. And we've seen this coast to coast here in the US. We've also seen examples coming in globally where we have really easily accessible devices to the public. And when I say easily accessible devices, that means somebody could climb a lamppost and get on top and attach into a module. You might look at a manhole cover today, and yes, those are connected. Parking meters, monitoring surveillance systems, things of that nature are all within a smart city today. And more use cases within the smart city are popping up, adding more complexity into the project. IT admins are having very difficult times managing the number and scale of the number of IoT devices that are associated with these projects, and also the multiple types of IoT devices that are coming in. The solution again here, guys, trusted third-party certificates, automated lifecycle management with the ability to do secure over-the-air updates. This gives that admin the ability to have full command and control of all the smart devices within the city that are deployed, or going even to a county perspective and managing multiple cities through an ecosystem. So we've put just a real quick diagram below. It just kind of shows you the simplicity of the administrator coming in. They log into the Comodo portal. Our servers, we collect a certain amount of information of the number of certificates. We've got various different enrollment options for you that you can provide to us for that secure mechanism of authentication. Our multiple signing servers then go to work and we sign that batch request. We place certificates then into an encrypted file and alert the administrator that they're ready. That admin simply logs into the account, downloads that encrypted file, uses the decryption tools that we provide, and then downloads the certificates down to their manufacturing facility or deploys them over the air to the device with the Keyscaler agent on them. A very, very robust and simple way to get certificates down to IoT devices at scale and to manage them ongoing, which is key. Adam, I think you might have had a question here about some additional use cases from us.
Well, and this is something where for us in the industry, it's interesting to note because there's so much architecture out there talking about security and IoT, and I always take a look at it from we're talking about safety and security, and smart cities obviously are critical infrastructure, but also I know that across various industries, whether it's utilities or even the medical devices. I know, Damon, I'll let you reference your anecdote here, but Device Authority, we always take a look at this and say you got to ask a question in the IoT. Are you evaluating security products, or are you trying to make secure products? So that's something where I think in the context of the Intel SDO and the Comodo service combination with Keyscaler, that's what we're trying to do, because in some cases it truly is a matter of life and death. And so, Damon, perhaps you can talk about your colleague and the issue that he had faced.
Yeah, no, and it is becoming a matter of life and death. And a lot of I have experience in issuing over 2 billion certificates to IoT devices, and a lot of those were, they're critical infrastructure devices, but they don't involve human life. I happen to have a colleague and a friend who has an embedded medical device inside of them. There was a vulnerability to 400,000 of those devices, and he was aware of it, but was not able to get into a doctor's office for 90 days for an appointment to have the patch issued to that device. So he spent 90 nights going to sleep wondering, what was going to happen with a vulnerable device embedded inside of his body. We're working, with aircrafts, with the Aeromax project to work on airplanes and ground control communications. So you can imagine if an Airbus A380 coming in for a landing had a problem with the digital security on that plane and it was attacked or it was vulnerable. So the scale of the threats has gone up. And when we start involving the risk of human life, we have to make sure that we're taking the necessary steps to protect those devices. And in my mind, 90 days to do a patch, to do an update, or to update security stance on a device is not acceptable. So it's one of those cases where if this device would have had Keyscaler and would have had a Komodo certificate on it, that device would have been able to been revoked, or the certificate would have been revoked and replaced immediately. And my friend probably would have got 90 nights of better sleep. Instead, he was vulnerable for 90 days. It wasn't a cable modem or a smart meter that was vulnerable for 90 days. It was a human life that was vulnerable for 90 days. That's something that we need to fix.
Well, and once again, I think that that's a real life example that's just going to be expanded, which is why we had this webinar today, because that's definitely something that needs to be considered when designing a product or deploying a product. What is the life cycle of it, right? How do you constantly update and defend? Ultimately, from a time to value perspective, how do you zero touch provision and put automated security policies on devices so that you remove the friction of you just don't have enough humans to manage it? Correct. So the automation is critical to the success of a project. And really, as I've referenced multiple times today, it does take an ecosystem to fully secure an IoT project, which is why once again we encourage anyone that has additional questions or would like to discuss an IoT project, leverage us. We're out in various customer sets each and every day. And I think it's critical to for all of us to expose the knowledge that we have. We at Device Authority understand there's other security products on the market, but once again, it takes various products to solve various problems. We understand where we fit in the whole continuum of things. We like to think we're kind of the glue, if you will, between big players like Intel and Comodo. And in fact, if you're available next week, I know representatives from Device Authority as well as Comodo are going to be out at the RSA show in San Francisco. So if you'd like to connect with us, please do. We also have an offer here, for engagements. If you toggle on that, again, the Enterprise IoT Security Guide that I referenced earlier, the link is there. But also from Device Authority, we do have a tremendous amount of collateral that is accessible via our website, including past webinars that can be viewed for other topics. Like I said, the device penetration testing, the hardware security module integration, et cetera. So with that, Rosa, I know we're coming up on the time. Maybe we have time for one or two quick questions.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, we have had a couple questions through actually about legacy devices and retrofitting, which I know Damon touched on a minute ago, but I'll make sure that we get back to the individuals soon. I've got one question I think hopefully we'll have time for. Damon, it's just more of a, I guess, adoption question. whether you're seeing an increase in the adoption of the PKI certs being burned at manufacturing stage. And I know you mentioned obviously smart cities and medical, but are there any other verticals which you feel are taking it seriously?
Yeah, no, I think the aviation industry is really looking at this hard. I have been involved with projects between Symantec and Comodo, both with aviation for the last 5 years. It's a slow-moving industry because there are lots of standards and regulations around it. But aviation, automotive is trying very hard, but it's a segregated group of manufacturers that pocket themselves in 3 or 4 manufacturers each, and they get an idea. But they're all of the same mindset that over-the-air key rotation is very important. We're also seeing in finance right now. So we've had several POS vendors come to us and say, hey, we need some help. Self-signed certs aren't doing it anymore, especially with the deep regulations there. So we're seeing a lot of traction, especially in regulated markets, but we're also seeing some of the industrial control guys come to us as well for sensors that are making 2-bit calls per month. They want to make sure that they've got proper security on there and that they can rotate out the security on those devices. So it really is from the smallest sensor in the world, Rosa, all the way up to an Airbus A380 or a Dreamliner 787. Huge tower cranes over in the Middle East and Dubai and places of that nature. Big critical infrastructure devices that have the capability of causing major impact, not only to a network system, but into society and into human life as well.
Great, thanks, Damon. We have actually come to the end of the webinar now, so any other questions we have not been able to answer will be answered individually this week. I just want to say another big thank you to Adam, Jan, and Damon, and also to our audience today. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have any further questions. And thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you, Rosa. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.